Welcome. I would ask that you please rise. I want to welcome a great crowd here today to hear about development in downtown. Before we get to our program, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd ask you to remain standing, and I'll have Randy Connect come forward to share our invocation.
Let's pray. Help us, Lord, as we work together to build your kingdom. Help us to be the light that leads the world to you. God, may we be good role models to the people around us so that when they see you and your love within us, they would want to know you more and more. God, grant us the patience to work together. Bring us all together as a family. Help us to work together and with understanding and compassion in our hearts. Lord, bless this meeting today and the food that we are to partake. In your name we pray. Amen.
All right, you may be seated. Thank you, Randy. We got a talkative group today, which is great. We have a full agenda. And before we jump into that, I would like to take a moment. We are today celebrating the life of a longtime Rotarian. Many of you knew Mark Shlanta well. His service celebration of life was earlier this morning. And you may have seen the post by Vernon Brown, who's a longtime employee at SDN Communications. I thought I'd just share a couple items from that as we remember Mark and pray for his family and friends. But in a recent post by Vernon, he shared 10 things he learned from Mark Shlanta, a former CEO of SDN Communications. 1, value people. 2, be fearless. 3, community matters. 4, family first. And 5, choose kindness always. There are 5 others that are also well articulated by Vernon Brown, but just did a fantastic job in a tribute to someone that went too early. Mark just turned 57 and passed here within the last week or two. And in that post, Vernon Brown goes on to say, "We're hurting at SDN Communications." And I would just share, we're hurting in Sioux Falls and in South Dakota at the passing of Mark. Vernon goes on to say, "Business is fine, exceptionally good, in fact, but at the hearts of our 120 employees are collectively breaking." And I just share that our entire community is hurting. And Mark was just one of those individuals, a longtime Rotarian that gave of himself in a selfless way to help build a better community. I just ask that you keep him and his family in your thoughts and prayers as we move forward. If you have an opportunity, you haven't had a chance yet, Vernon also put together a tribute video on Mark's career and life. It's his Hall of Fame, South Dakota Hall of Fame video. I'd ask that you go out there and take a look at that. Quite a legacy he will leave. Turning now to our guests, we have a lot of guests here today in a full program, so we're not going to invite all the guests to stand up, but or be recognized. But I just want to welcome all of our guests that are here and the Rotarians that invited you to join us. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us. I do want to welcome our 2 junior Rotarians, Elena Bergwald and Sam Markley. If you'll please rise, we're going to hear from Sam here shortly. So thank you for being with us through the month of February. And with that, I'm going to have Kayla Etram come forward and introduce our speaker for today, our junior Rotarian speaker for the day.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Sam makes his way up here, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him before he gets the chance to speak. So help me welcome Sam Markley from Washington High School. Sam is involved in theater, debate, and National Honor Society. He's in the powerful group of the Mayor's Youth Council, doing great work there, and is interested in reading, music, and politics. He plans to attend USD. I'll pause for applause if anyone wants to be excited about that. Okay. There's a lot of Yotes fans in this room, Sam, to study history, with his future occupation being listed as a lawyer. So please help me welcome Sam Markley from Washington High School.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you to the Rotary Club for allowing me to be here. I think it's such a great opportunity that you're providing to members of the Sioux Falls School District to let aspiring young adults come in and see what is being done for the community. And I think that's so important because the seniors and juniors in high school, they're the ones that are going to be carrying on the torch for the future and helping the community just get all that much greater. And that when I look at everything that young adults in my life are doing, especially in the past 6 months with the Mayor's Youth Council, we all have a lot of plans and really want to make Sioux Falls and South Dakota a better place for everyone. When I look at the Mayor's Youth Council, I'm with 12 other seniors in high school who are all very opinionated and have a lot of great ideas for Sioux Falls. They're all worried about like the issues in Sioux Falls, whether it's the rising crime rate, the rising homelessness, the drug addiction. All these are things that we care about because it not only affects everyone in Sioux Falls, but also the youth specifically. And with all these in mind, there's some issues I see with them trying to implement these ideas they have. We're very loud to Mayor Hagen and telling them what we want to get done, but sometimes we just can't get everything accomplished. So what a lot of us want to do is stay in South Dakota, and once we get our education, continue to come back into the community and make it better for everyone. But while there are 13 of us that plan on doing that, other people I talk to don't have necessarily the same vision. A lot of them are being driven away, going out of state for education, and not coming back. And so what I wanted to see when I was first invited to the Rotary Club is see what's being done in Sioux Falls and South Dakota to keep the youth in state and allow them to better the community for everyone. And I was very pleased when the first presentation that I was given was with Dakota State and their Cyber Academy, and how that's creating a bunch of new jobs and allowing better accessibility for opportunities. Because at the end of the day, when people get better access to opportunities, when people are made aware of the opportunities they have to better themselves and their community, that makes it all the more better for everyone. One of the things that specifically with Cyber Academy was the fact that they're enabling accessibility in specifically rural areas. And so what I see with this is there are a lot of people and a lot of young adults in Sioux Falls and South Dakota as a whole that want to make the community better, want to make life better for everyone, no matter who they are, where they come from, or how old they are. But what matters is ensuring that opportunities are made available for them to carry out these ideas. And so I'm very thankful for the Rotary Club showing me how all of you care about the young adults in the community and want to give them the opportunities. Once again, when I looked at the Dakota Academy presentation, they stressed heavily about keeping youth in state. And when I looked around at the audience, all of you were nodding along with that, and all of you like deeply cared about that. You want to see children stay in state and continue to make South Dakota and Sioux Falls a great place to live. So I just want to urge to, with whatever you do in life and your careers, to continue to help youth and young adults stay in state and enable opportunities for them to make Sioux Falls and South Dakota a better place. So you can give us the torch and pass it on and allow us to take it in stride.
Wow. I see why you were on the list of youth for the mayor's council. So keep up the good work, Sam. And we love the fact that you're looking at a future here, a better future in Sioux Falls. And we have a couple projects we're going to talk about here that our community is making significant investments to make things better for the next generation, and can't wait to hear about these two projects here. But Sam, well done. Next, I'm going to have Cindy Peterson come forward. We have a couple inductions of new members here today, and excited to have Cindy come forward and introduce our first.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I am so very, very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce to you all Kim Urkonen. Kim is a financial advisor at Baird and has been working in the financial advising industry since 1997. I met Kim a year ago this month. And in a very, very short amount of time, she has left quite an impression on my heart. I would say and describe her as a true servant leader. She's passionate about helping youth in our community, and she spends a great deal of time with her husband, Scott, and their 4 children. Scott even came today to see her induction, which is so awesome. I am truly in awe of Kim's strong faith and the amazing work she does running the nonprofit First Priority of the Great Plains. I'm excited for all of you to get to know Kim better, and I invite her now to share a bit more about herself. Kim.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, fellow Rotarians. I was introduced to Rotary years ago. I had the pleasure of being partnered with a gentleman, for those of you that have been around the block for a while, Jerry Awe. He was a longtime Rotarian, and I had the pleasure of working with him since 2001 until he retired in 2016. And he was an amazing mentor to me. And one thing that always stood out about Jerry was his humility and his servanthood. And Rotary was a staple on his calendar every week. So I am honored to be in this room with you. I'm honored to be able to serve alongside you and to get to know you more. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy, and welcome, Kim. Next, I'll have Rich Nazer come forward and introduce Clark Hagen.
Thank you, President Tony and fellow Rotarians. It's my pleasure to introduce Clark Hagen. He's the general manager for McGough Construction's Sioux Falls office in downtown. Clark is a native of Fortuna, North Dakota. I'll let him explain where that is if you don't know. And a graduate of both North Dakota State College of Science and Minnesota State Community Technical College. Clark has more than 20 years of experience in the construction industry, having lived in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Fargo prior to Sioux Falls. He's been involved in the community and where he's worked. He helped start Nevada's Young Contractors Forum for their AGC, and is on the advisory board for Southeast Technical College and for North Dakota State College of Science for other construction management programs. He and his wife, Melissa, moved their family to Sioux Falls in 2021 to open McGough's office. They have 3 children, Adley, age 9, Ace, age 6, and Axel, age 2. So please join me in welcoming Clark Hagen.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. Thank you, Rich. Moving down to Sioux Falls, South Dakota was a big leap, not only for myself and my family, but for McGough Construction. Given the opportunity, was something I never thought I'd progress through my career. Even coming up from pre-construction through estimating to where I am at now. I give a lot of that to mentors that I've had. I really thank Rich for being a mentor in business, getting to know everything about Sioux Falls and South Dakota. One of the things I look forward to doing is being an asset to the community, growing here with each and every one of you, whether it's the experienced individual or even Sam. I know there's a lot of things I could learn from him and the experienced individuals in this room. I certainly look forward to that. Rich mentioned being an advisor with construction programs throughout campuses. So working with the college kids and all the way down to being a den leader with the Cub Scouts. It's quite interesting leading a pack of 6-year-olds, and really what they're gaining out of from me, I think I'm actually gaining more, just really working with the youth, understanding what drives them, what controls them, and just providing a really great experience. So I look forward to bringing that not only from that level, but also at college type level. Once again, I thank everyone coming down here over the last year and a half. The whole community has been warm, welcoming, whether it's in business or personal relationships. The community's been outstanding, and I look forward to being a part of that. Thank you.
We'll have our guest speakers come forward here while we're taking a picture. We'll get started.
They arranged our mics.
Move around, they got me locked in
No,
here.
you're good. You're good.
All right. Once again, Clark and Kim, welcome to Downtown Rotary. All right. Well, we are going to move on to our program today and talk about development, specifically downtown. With us today, we have Executive Vice President of Development from Lloyd Companies, Jake Quasney. And Jake grew up in Rapid City before attending Chadron State College in Nebraska. After graduation, he attended the University of South Dakota School of Law, and then went on to complete his LLM in taxation through the University of Alabama. Following graduation from law school, Jake clerked a year in the 7th Circuit of South Dakota, and after his clerkship, he joined Banks McCullen, where he focused on transactional business, estate, and tax planning. In 2015, he joined Lloyd Companies and now serves as Executive Vice President of Development, overseeing many functions of the business. Jake and his wife, Lindsay, met in high school, and they have 2 children, Piper and Sawyer. So help me in welcoming Jake Quasney. And to Jake's right, your left, we have Jeff Shirsley, Managing Partner of Pendar Properties and lead developer of the Cherapa Place expansion. Many of you know both Jake and Jeff. Jeff is a retired insurance professional with a passion for development. Ever since the age of 5, he knew that insurance would be part of his story. And at age 29, he found himself as the president of Hull McDowell. After decades of success and a few community projects later, he decided to play his hand at the development game based out of a need for his growing company. Down went the Zip feed mill eventually, and up went Cherapa Place. From there, he and his team tackled a few other projects, a renovation of the historic Carpenter building and an overhaul of a mid-century apartment building. Recently, he and his partners broke ground on a $225 million Cherapa Place community expansion, which we'll hear about here. Jeff is very proud of his hometown. His favorite phrase is "Go Sioux Falls." His passion is evidenced by his selfless work in community projects, many of which you are familiar with, but I'll name a few of them. Sioux Falls Area Community Foundation, Sioux Empire United Way, Great Bear Recreation Park, Good Earth State Park, South Dakota Parks and Wildlife Foundation. In his free time, Jeff enjoys hunting, nature, conservation, riding horses, and also spends some time in my hometown of Armour, South Dakota, which is a fun connection. But we welcome you, Jeff. Thank you, both Jake and Jeff, for being here, and Jason for moderating today's conversation. With that, I'll let you take it from here. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, President Tony, and thank you, fellow Rotarians and guests, for joining us today. And but most importantly, thank you, Jeff and Jake, for joining us here to talk about 2 very exciting developments that are going on in downtown Sioux Falls. For the purpose of this discussion, we're going to be kind of navigating through a variety of topics. We're going to start with kind of the evolution of downtown, because these pieces are important to where downtown was 30 to 40 years ago, where we are today, and then we'll seek out some insights from these 2 gentlemen on where they think it could go in the future. So that'll be kind of the sequence and how we'll approach the discussion today. Really going to start out with a question for you, Jeff. You really have figured out a way to set the bar high for all of us on a second act in life.
Or failure in retirement, let's say that.
I don't know. You've set the bar remarkably high. Go Sioux Falls is your motto. Can you tell us why you are so passionate about downtown development in general, and Sioux Falls?
Well, ultimately, folks, it goes back to, I was in the insurance business, but I did go to school at the College of Insurance in downtown New York. So I was always really, caught up in the quality architecture, quality buildings, people building long-term quality structures. And then I ended up as part of for my growing business, I needed a new location for Howalt McDowell. And I was looking around at properties and ended up running into the Zip feed site, which had really been a goal of the community to potentially put the event center down there. So that's how I really got involved. And then I found a group of investor partners that were looking to deploy the Zip site to the highest and best use for this community. We've looked at things, we've designed the event center at one point down there, downtown convention center, a hotel, development, and a multi-use. So all we are doing is doing what the community wants and putting that property to the highest and best use. Obviously the switchyard has come out. It's opened up the possibility. It took quite a while. It's interesting to know how government works versus private sector, because we had the funding, before we even bought the land, the earmark, and it took about 15 years for the government to finally get it out of there. But basically, I've just grown up in Sioux Falls. I'm glad to be a part of it. If I can try to make a little bit of a difference in my short time here, that's really what it's all about for me and my family.
Well, Jeff, we appreciate the energy you've brought to the downtown and to development in general. And Jake, turning it over to you, you work for Lloyd Companies, and Lloyd Companies has been pushing the envelope on advancing Sioux Falls for decades now. We don't want to presume all the decisions that go on at the Lloyd Companies every single day. Can you just tell us what drives that organization's passion to make improvements in not just downtown, but across the city?
Yeah, I mean, really, when we look at projects and it becomes infinitely more important in a downtown project, you look at what you're doing to impact the community. And there's a lot of different factors, obviously, in order to be the guy who still gets to present these projects to people. They all have, they generally have to be successful, and we can't go bankrupt on any of them. So we got to figure that out. But Craig, especially in downtown, it started 20 years ago, where he looked at the community with Steve Metley, and, Steve really spoke a vision into him about that. And they've, if you were to hop in a car on a Saturday morning with Craig, he'd tell you about all sorts of dreams all over Sioux Falls. So there's no shortage of dreams at Lloyd Companies. It's about figuring out how to make them happen here. And we have such a great and collaborative business community that, it's things like this. So we've been sitting down and talking about projects like these two that, like Jeff and I have in the past. They come together and figuring out how they complement one another and make a more attractive community. It's going to drive more amenities for our families. I've got 270 employees. We're trying to create a better life for them and their families, create things that'll create more opportunities and allow us to continue to make a difference.
Thank you. The evolution of downtown has been something nothing short of marvelous. In my 20 years that I've been in Sioux Falls, a little more than that, it's transformed. Let's go further back than that. Lloyd has been involved with the development of downtown Sioux Falls since downtown really started getting developed. And Jeff, you too, and you've lived here, the entire time. Can you guys, and when you look at this room and look at people, or think about the people that are probably watching right now, we all have a different lens in which we've seen downtown evolve. Can we just talk a little bit about what it was, say, 40 years ago? So some folks in this room can picture what it was, because we're going to be navigating to where we are and where we could be going. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I think it's important to put into perspective of going, I'm going to go back further than that to like the 1870s, 1880s when Sioux Falls was just a new city and et cetera. But basically downtown was the center of this community from its beginning. You know, I mean, even Fort Sod was right here behind us on the river, right at 7th Street and the river where the city first began. But you also have to understand that Sioux Falls downtown was a happening place in the 80s and the 1880s, 1890s as the divorce capital of the United States. People could come to South Dakota and Sioux Falls in particular and stay here for 3 months to 6 months, and then they could get divorced. And so we were one of the quickest places in the United States for that. So there was 5 major hotels downtown, you know, and then what happened is downtown was the center of everything all the way until the Western Mall. So the malls took what was downtown and where all the vibrancy and the retail and et cetera was, and the housing was never in downtown in a major way, and it moved it to the malls. And so the kind of the urban spread of Sioux Falls happened in the 70s, and the downtown died. And then it came that the Phillips to the Falls restoration, kind of through Mayor Munson and the council and the city, said, hey, we've got to revitalize downtown. We tried various things, you know, a downtown mall that didn't work, but ultimately it was the Phillips to the Falls development that sprung into, you know, action, but also it was the visionaries. It was Steve Metley. It was Jeff Hazard. It was Rick Gorley. It was Marv Luby, who saw that, hey, downtowns were happening all over the country. Let's put housing down there. Let's rejuvenate these historic buildings and et cetera. So the national trends created a situation where things were coming back. So ultimately you had those folks building and adding to downtown. And ultimately we came along with Cherapa I that kind of moved things to the East Bank. And so as part of that, it was the River Greenway and the vision of downtown, and the city for the River Greenway having a much more of a San Antonio activity concept. Cherapa I, all that has occurred with the zip boom, I want to call it. And there was over $100 million worth of development that went around all of that zip development on the East Bank. So you had the visionaries that were creating downtown, the ZIP project occur, many other things, whether it be the lumber exchange, the Raven industry, remodeling. And ultimately, we went from a place that had very few people living in downtown to Joe in downtown Sioux Falls just gave me that there's 1,700 housing units and over 3,500 people living in downtown Sioux Falls. That's been the evolution over the last 50 years.
Jake, over at Lloyd Companies, you guys have been heavily involved with downtown development, and Craig has, back to those conversations that he and Steve would have when they would, you know, go to Falls Park and kind of cast a vision on what things could look like. What at your organization, and just in talking to Craig, what are kind of the 1, 2, or 3 kind of inflection points, if you will, over the last few decades that have brought us to this point where we see just so much success?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it really is covered in what Jeff said there is people had a vision and they kind of stepped out in it. And I know there's a slide that you were going to show at the end that kind of compares at least uptown in that Phillips to the Falls area. But people took big risks, and it's a community of business people that come along together. I mean, that's what sets Sioux Falls apart from a lot of the places we do business. You know, kind of stepped out and did big things. And then, you know, one success led to another, and we kept going. The city and the community got behind it, and we invested in it as a community. And so it's great to see those visions, but then to have maybe some of it's stupid at times. You know? Craig certainly thought it was when we told him we were going to build a $200 million project, but then we showed him what he had already done, and we got him on board. But you know, those are the sort of things that at first, there's plenty of days, we're probably still there, right, Jeff? Every once in a while, we go, what are we doing? And so it's having the willingness to step out and create a vision and bring partners along who will step up alongside you.
Well, I appreciate that. And let's just put a pin in this moment that nobody else in this room knew that this was the divorce capital of the United States. We'll get to public and private partnerships here in a bit.
A little bit of trivia.
We're gonna cover each of the projects. We're gonna start with Cherapa. Jeff, please just take a moment and kind of walk through the project with us. I do have the clicker, so you can guide me and tell me where I need to go. But walk through, the project in general, what the foundation of your vision, and why we should be so as excited as you are about Cherapa.
Well, ultimately, I think, again, if you looked at the Cherapa One, even it talks about that Cherapa One is really dedicated to downtown and Sioux Falls, so everything that we've done is really a vision of what the community wants, or what, they've shown in various studies, and over time, this is what they want. And actually, as part of the Cherapa vision to acquire the rail yard, switch yard land to make this possible, we had to go through a whole process of showing them that we were fitting the vision of Sioux Falls and downtown. And that is a requirement of even acquiring that land. So it starts there. And so ultimately, as I indicated, we tried over the years to deploy it into an event center, into a convention center, into a hotel. Ultimately, what has come along is there's already convention center they didn't want to. The event center went out by the arena, whether it was the failed hotel or now the Lloyd's hotel project, that space has been filled. So ultimately, we saw that there was a need for additional office space, and we wanted to leverage it accordingly, but also to create the mixed use that you see here. So you're actually looking from what would be the commercial building that I'll show you in a moment back into a courtyard surrounded by retail on the main level and 5 stories worth of mass timber frame apartments. If you go to the next slide, here you'll see, technology, anything with me and technology, it'll go bad. I can tell you that. But basically, folks, there is just an overview of Cherapa One you're familiar with, the white roof there, Cherapa One. Cherapa Two is to the north of that. That is a 10-story building housing 145,000 square foot of office, 15,000 square foot of retail, and condominiums on floors 9 and 10. That then is backed up by what we call Building 3, or the Clark building. That has 30,000 square foot of retail on the main level and 5 stories of apartments and about 120 units, something of that nature. If you go down from that building to the south, we get to Building 4. That has 15,000 square foot of retail on the main level, and again, 5 stories of apartments and about 105 units in that. And all that is backed up by a very large parking ramp of over 650 units. Now, what makes that site unique, and if you go by there today, you're going to see that we've got a little bit of Fred Flintstone going on over there. There's a lot of rock because there's going to be about 300 underground and conditioned parking spots under this facility. The one thing I want to point out is if you see Cherapa One in the white and then that interconnect. So you'll see in the next picture, if you look, that looks like kind of a walkway between the buildings, but what it really is that's a 5,000 square foot conference center for the 2 commercial buildings to use. There's 3 different basically conference rooms encased in that interconnect at the 3-story heights. There's a 5,000 square foot outdoor deck on top of that. Ultimately, that can be converted. That's our commitment to our community. That can be used on the weekend and house weddings up to 350 people for dinners and activities on Friday nights and Saturday night. So it's not just for these commercial people, but one of the things that I've always wanted to do is to, again, deploy this to the highest and best use for our community. Here you'll get a look at, obviously, embracing our riverfront, how we have Cherapa I and Cherapa II, again, with the Interconnect Conference Center before, and obviously the apartments, the retail, and all of the parking is behind that. So there is a total of 4 new structures basically, and encompassing over $200 and some million worth of development.
Covered a lot of ground there. Such a big project.
Yeah, I'm finding that to be the case for a retired guy. And unlike Jake, he's got 270 employees. So we're kind of the David against the Goliath because we got 3.
Okay, so let's talk about those 3 people. You know, this is a massive and such an exciting project. And I just want to congratulate you and thank you, frankly, for such an investment in downtown Sioux Falls and the city.
Well, it's not all my money. It's many of you out there are investors as well, though.
Well, thank them as well for this. I can only begin to imagine the amount of cognitive, effort that goes into putting together such a massive project. You have to assess viability. You have to assess the, just all the different technicalities of just getting a project of this scale built. Can you walk us through kind of how you begin to think about these things and what goes into your thinking to come to a point where you're actually digging a hole?
Well, I start with a yellow pad. Pretty simple when it comes down to it. And again, what we were looking for was what made sense. And again, when it came down to it, I've had some success with multifamily, plus the city's requirement of the rail yard would have required a multi-use facility. With that, we really always were dedicated to doing another large office tower, but ultimately for me as well, I looked at, to some degree, we tend to let things slip out of downtown because Sioux Falls is such a dynamic community that you have things building all the way on the outskirts of town, offices and retail. We've got to dedicate back to this core. The strength of a community is their core. So I felt very strongly that if we could do an office tower and attract a major tenant like a bank core, it really would make a difference to downtown and bring that employment down here. And then as you talk about, as you get the other tenants and they stay downtown or they're new to downtown, that drives all of the retail. So with that, it really comes down to having knowledge of Cherapa that I did. Again, we have done a number of other smaller projects in the multi-use and multifamily area. So it's really a matter of putting the numbers down. And one of the things that I always find is I start by saying, what does the market bear for a rental rate? So you can't just say, build it and they will come. You must compete in the marketplace. Now, again, I will tend to be on the higher end because we're going to do the quality and the what we really want to try to accomplish from a community. But you can't, you got to be competitive. So you start there, then you get with your partners, the Journey Construction Group and the ISG Design Group, and we start to imagine what could happen. And then you start to, they sat down with me and they said, Jeff, what do you want? What do you want? So they put together that, and then they start to put the pretty pictures together. Then you start putting the cost together. Then you get all excited. And then what happens is you commit to all this damn stuff. And then all of a sudden the price keeps going up and up and up and up. And then all of a sudden you choke a little bit further and you work with your partners. And you know what? Because you have everybody working together, it comes together because you have the good intentions. You have this great city government and a city government that is a can-do people. And when all of that comes together, you're going to get something like this. And again, folks, none of this is possible without this dynamic city of Sioux Falls that can absorb this project and the steel project all at once and transform the downtown and this community for the next 100 years.
Well, I'm energized, and I'm sure everybody else is.
So come to the retail so we can pay for the damn thing.
love following Jeff.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to ask if they can move. My clicker is not working. There you go. Well, Jake, the steel project is one for the ages as well. Can you talk to us about the vision that Lloyd Companies has for the steel district?
Yeah, I mean, that vision goes back. It's actually funny to go through our files because we have, I think the first time we did something, a site plan on the Sioux Steel site, it was 2003. So Craig's been playing around with that since he first started looking at things in Uptown. This is that picture that I was talking about earlier. I mean, it's just crazy to imagine on the top what Sioux Falls was 20 years ago. And we need to update the 2021 one, because we actually have vertical construction now. But, to see what's in Uptown, obviously, the community came together and got the Levitt shell, the Jacobson family and the city putting in the ice ribbon and everything there. Uptown Sioux Falls it is an incredible place to be today, and it's only getting better, and tying into that environment of downtown. So when they started 20 years ago, he had a pretty large vision. And when we came to him, Chris and I, it was almost 4 years ago, and we said we wanted to do a $200 million project all at once. We've got a chance, 7 acres downtown, top of the falls. You only get one shot at it. It's not like you get to tear it down in 10 years and do it again. And I thought he was going to throw us out that day. But we came back and we showed him this, and it's like, you turned a salvage yard, which had literally the hole would start on fire. There was so much petroleum in the ground whenever they struck a rock. So like when we were excavating for Cascade, I mean, it's just terrible stuff that we had to deal with in fixing that. Steel District had very little, if any, serious contamination that we had to deal with. And so that was kind of a blessing in this as we deal with Jeff's rising cost issue. But that vision was really important to us to make sure this is on the back of the postcard when you take a picture of the falls from that bridge. I mean, this you see this project. If we go to the next slide, if we were to go about 100 feet above the falls, this is what you're looking at. And on the left there, we have a 9-story office building that has 174,000 square feet in it. It's anchored on the ground floor with 3 restaurants, a restaurant group that was looking to do business here in Sioux Falls. They're bringing through 3 great concepts here. The Smack Shack will be in that 2-story restaurant on the falls, which will be really cool. It's a fresh seafood concept. If you're ever up in the Twin Cities, they have a few of them. I would encourage you to check it out because it's phenomenal. And then there's a tequila bar with a Mexican food concept and a burger joint. But then the office building is already a little over 70% leased with really great tenants. We've got people who want to, the top 2 floors, it was just announced this week, C&B Industries, they're relocating from Minneapolis, and they're already in the Lumber Exchange building. And they've filled up 12,000 square feet with people who are moving here from Minnesota. So it's phenomenal to see how desirable it is to be here. And then next to that, we've got the 7-story Canopy by Hilton Hotel with the convention center in front of it. The largest ballroom there can host up to 800 people in rows. You can put a 550-person wedding in there. And we've got several other kind of junior ballrooms and breakout rooms to service various events that will, we believe that thing will attract. And then we really wanted to create something that was, 1, walkable, and 2, it evolves. It's something that it's multi-generational. It's a place you can go grab a cup of coffee. It's a place that you're doing happy hour in the afternoons. And then we've got the late night atmosphere that we're trying to create. But Canopy was a big part of that. Today, there's 35 of them in the world. It's Hilton's upper upscale lifestyle brand. And when we told them, and this was a whim thing, Chris wanted that here because he went to one in Reykjavik, and we told him to come, and they said, no, Sioux Falls is too small. We want the top 50 markets in the world. And we convinced them to come. It was Tuesday, March 27th. And they wanted to see the activity in downtown Sioux Falls. So a few companies who are friends of ours, we said, hey, if you send your employees out to these 8 places, we'll pay you up to $50 a person. And we spent $27,000 that night. But it was 70 degrees that day, so we didn't even need it. It was insane. But we're walking down Phillips Avenue, and he said, we're bringing Canopy to Sioux Falls. After he had asked us where the Starbucks was, and we started all trying to explain how you get to Starbucks, and he's like, no, this is great. You guys can support local coffee shops, all these little retail shops or boutique. This is a Canopy town, and they absolutely love it because of the way that our businesses support one another, our community supports it, and it's really going to be something that is an amenity for the community. That's what they want to be, not just a hotel sitting on top of the falls. And then behind that, we've got the 930 stall parking structure that we've hidden behind a bunch of apartments and condos with 30,000 square feet of retail on the ground level. So it really creates a very complementary atmosphere. And when you look at what's happening on the East Bank and the way that these projects really meet one another, if you look at how close those cranes are to one another, you're not walking very far to go back and forth here. So the atmosphere, the connectivity of downtown, East Bank, and uptown is incredible.
Wow. So when you're from the outside looking in, listening to the two of you talk, I mean, these 2 projects are going to change the skyline of Sioux Falls. It's already changed in the last 20 years. We saw it, that picture. We've witnessed it, we've experienced it, but these 2 projects are really going to change the skyline. We see it now. It's you guys are building. You guys are starting the work to get these things built. But you started on that yellow pad a long time ago, and Jake, you mentioned Craig started thinking about that downtown site 20 years ago. There's a lot that goes into something like this, a lot, and I don't think we all appreciate it enough. The amount of blood, sweat, and tears and resources that go into projects like this. I cannot even begin to imagine the challenges, both foreseen and unforeseen, that jump in front of you when you start with your yellow pad and get to this point. Can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges that you've that kind of slapped you in the face over the last few years when it came to some of these projects?
Sure.
Obviously, the biggest thing today is cost. And that we're in a very volatile market right now, and we know of supply chains, but it's also just the costs continue to rise. And so, but it also is happening to all forms of housing and construction, and it always has. It's just a little more accelerated. So it's really hard to keep that vision. One of the things today is you build these beautiful pictures, and they're so real that you're going to hold us to that, and that's what costs and et cetera. The other thing that we've had a lot to deal with is the rock. So you have to understand, this isn't like going out and starting in a field out, in a cornfield on the outskirts of Sioux Falls. There is a tremendous amount of quartzite that we're having to deal with, whether it's us at our site, the city redoing 6th Street, and that adds a lot of cost and complications with that. And part of it too is we're also building in a downtown environment. So we're disrupting. So we had 350 people in a parking lot behind Cherapa that I had to displace at this point in time. We got explosions going on around there for our folks. We've got, we're having to close down the street here and do this. So the disruptions are really tough on the people. And again, all you can do is kind of say, hey, folks, you have to go through the pain to get the gain. So again, by showing them the visions of where we're going, a lot of people will deal with that. The other part of our project that was a challenge, and I think, Jake would say the same thing. We started kind of looking during the time of the COVID, and were offices going to be a viable prospect in the future? People are, we haven't, I go up to some of Cherapa today, and it's like a ghost town for a while. People are starting to come back, but that was a huge fear. What was interesting was to find the tenants, whether it be Bancor, iBailey, ISG, MarketBeat, who are saying, hey, folks, we are dedicated to downtown. We're dedicated to our employees, and we believe the world will come back to that. So again, they're taking that risk, and they're saying, folks, We got to get back. And I want to say that to all of the business leaders out there is you can't have a viable downtown with retail and bars and restaurants if you don't commit to get your folks back as well. We need to do this to keep the viability of this downtown. And it's up to you as leaders. And again, I think it can be a hybrid, but we need them downtown. Otherwise, we won't have this. We'll have like we had back in the 80s when it was all boarded up and there was no retail and all the businesses were leaving downtown. We've created that environment to bring them back, and it's up to us to lead and get our employees back.
Jake, you know, the office setting, you know, had to have been a thing. I mean, you know, you guys were starting to think about this and probably had the ball a long ways down the field before COVID even happened. How did you guys think about that, and how did you overcome that just internally?
Yeah, well, when COVID hit, we were supposed to break ground in 3 months and had over $4 million spent on the whole thing. And so that was a really fun set of conversations to have a $125 million tied up in a hotel and an office, and then COVID hits. And everyone says, yeah, we're going to work from home forever. And, you know, having these conversations, and you got to decide, do I completely pivot and change this, scrap $4 million, or go down that path? And so we did spend a lot of time talking to our friends. Our organization doesn't really function in a remote environment. So it's easy to see that there are at least some people out there that are going to need that. And culture. I mean, that came up so often, is how do you keep that culture? So the office, we believe in, regardless of some of the changes that are going to come. Some of those are going to be real. The office is going to be an important element of the future, just even from that cultural standpoint of being able to touch the people and offer that environment to people. And so that's where we landed. And when we stuck with it, the plan as you see it.
A lot of talk has been had here today, and we know it living here and experiencing it every day. Just a strong public and private partnership. And it takes a strong public and private partnership to see these kinds of efforts go from yellow pad to fruition. Can you talk about why a strong public partnership is so important? Let's just get down to brass tacks. You know, TIF. Everybody talks about TIFs. Can you explain why it's so important that a viable TIF program be available to help downtown continue to develop?
Well, if you start with the premise that I talked about when we got going, is you have to have a rental rate that is competitive in the market, okay? I mean, because ultimately you've got to get your tenants or none of this happens. And within that, the challenge in downtown is number one, parking. And the downtown group has created a parking, group or self-funding our own parking ramps. And ultimately they can only spend so much, but they also subsidize those ramps. And within that, it makes it very hard to compete. And I can tell you, I can show you all these beautiful pictures, folks. And I would say parking is the order of priority of people that I deal with. I'm so sick of it, I can't tell you how that's all anybody cares about. South Dakotans, everybody wants to park 10 feet from the front door. That's just our nature when it comes down to it. So ultimately it takes that partnership. And so within that, it takes the city government through TIF to really provide the parking. So the bulk of the TIF that's involved in our two projects are all paid for downtown ramp parking. And ramp parking is 5 times as expensive as surface parking. So that makes it uncompetitive for your tenants if you don't have that support. Within that, it's not only then the TIF that the city has got to be part of, but they've got to work together to help, the streets and the bridges be redesigned. They have to find ways to help us, as we're trying to work in this very dense environment and get the building and work with the builders and not disrupting people. All that is part of a community and a government. So ultimately, the way these big things get done, and I was involved in Cherapa I. It was one of the early TIF projects that hadn't happened for quite a few years, but it was also the River Greenway. So when big things get done, it's a public-private partnership, And that leveraged all the other growth. I think there's over $100 million of development that then pays taxes in to the system and creates the sales tax. So it takes that cooperation in the right situations, because downtown is a challenge and you need that public-private partnership. And this community is one of the best at it. And I give a lot of credit to our city government.
Jake, you guys work in projects outside of Sioux Falls, and you see and experience public and private partnerships elsewhere. And Jeff, I'm sure you have as well. How does Sioux Falls really differentiate itself from other communities that you either work in or have just talked to other developers in terms of the public and private partnership and how well it functions here relative to others?
Yeah, I think the city administration here, the staff is the key to that. Everybody's got their tools and their tools are a little different. The staff here, I think, really understands how to use those tools. And, generally speaking, they're willing to work with us to come up with creative ways to figure out how to get it done. And I think that's critical because it's literally the only tool we have in South Dakota to drive the elevated quality of a project like this. I could go and put, 5 apartment buildings on that project and self-park them, but the city we as taxpayers have to recognize you're foregoing substantial revenues into the future because I only built an $80 million project where I could have built a $220 million project as a result of this.
Good way of putting it. We are now likely moving into a higher interest rate environment. Most signs
Says a banker.
Point right. Says a banker. Well played. And you already know that costs have gone up. When we think about and when developers think about these projects, how critical are those two components into how much development we'll see over maybe the next few years?
I think we have a lot of momentum going in this community, so people will find a way, and it hasn't gotten too far out of hand. But I can tell you, if I wasn't able to get the kind of interest and banking arrangement that we ended up, it was so pressured by the pricing increases, it would have been really impossible to do. I think there's going to be a little bit of at some point that's economics. This bubble gets too fast and too high, and the construction costs are going up. Some of that is obviously labor and the supply chain, but some of it's taking advantage of a supply and demand situation. So you're going to see a little bit, maybe a pullback a little bit, with a little higher interest rate. Some of those have to balance themselves to make it work, because ultimately it's a return situation. So it does have to balance. And if one gets too far out of whack, it really slows down development. But when you have a need like Sioux Falls with thousands and thousands of short housing units, we've got to figure it out, because people, we got the jobs coming. We got to have some place to house them. So there's going to have to be a balance point there. And we'll just have to see how economics work through that.
One last question that I'd like each of you to perhaps touch on. We've talked about what downtown Sioux Falls looked like back when we were the divorce capital of the United States, and we talk about where we're at today. Let's get our crystal balls out and think, 20, 30, 40 years ahead. Sam will have gotten his great education at the University of South Dakota. He'll be back in Sioux Falls, driving results. What should he expect to see here in downtown Sioux Falls 20, 30 years?
I think it'll be filling that in. Obviously, we've seen these great investments. That few blocks on Phillips has been great for a long time. Uptown is an incredible place to be. What's happening on the east side now, that's going to strategically fill in and create this very walkable, connecting core. That's the whole thing that I think the city's desire to plan downtown, but then you're going to see it start to grow out from that too, and getting walkable amenities and those sort of things that go out towards Weber Avenue, going out from the East Bank with the additional development in the rail yard, and going up to Minnesota Avenue, with some of the Minnesota Avenue improvements really starting to draw that area out where downtown expands its footprint, where buildings continue to get a little bit more verticality as that's become more prevalent within our community and more viable from a construction standpoint. But then the key is going to be being really strategic about how we make sure we're driving good, strong strategic development that supports and replaces some of the naturally affordable housing that we have in and around the core, which is really critical to the long-term success of the community, making sure that those people have access to the transportation to get work and other services in the event that they don't have a car. And so there's a lot of that on that fringe, that naturally affordable housing, that as downtown grows, you have to be very intentional about the way that we interact with those parts of the communities and improve those while still embracing that element.
Thank you. How about you, Jeff?
Well, I thought about that for a minute, and obviously I won't get to enjoy 50 years in the future, but my grandchildren, I hope, will be able to. But ultimately, I kind of reflected for a moment because I watched, I might have been Netflix or something, one of the kids got me onto, but it was the Warren Buffett special. And it had the history of Warren Buffett. And part of it started out, and he was talking about Omaha, and it was like in the 60s. And there was like 270,000 people. Sounds kind of familiar to me. And they're over 1 million today, 50 years later, folks. You know, Sioux Falls has continued to set itself up as a place that's going to be a viable, you know, intersection of 2 interstates, a good airport, quality diversification in our economics. You know, the world has changed. We don't, you know, I mean, people, I've said, they may come from New York and California and Chicago and Minneapolis because of they're too crowded there, but they're not going to come here and unfortunately, Tony, not go to Armour, South Dakota, because they want the lifestyle they had in the big cities. And Sioux Falls is really providing that quality kind of urban lifestyle where you can get your coffee and you can get your drinks and have good restaurants and have the event center and the Sanford Sports Complex and the Washington Pavilion and all of the ingredients. And it's all of those pieces that have come together that there's no reason not to think that this town is not going to be on a hyper growth pattern because we're putting in the jobs. We had the foresight for the big industrial park out here that's brought Amazon and CF Foods and FedEx. I mean, everything this community continues to do. And I've loved to call it the little town that could. So all of us read a little bit about the little train that could. Well, this is a little town that could, folks. And it's going to keep happening. And we're going to be proud of this. And yet what we have to do is fight hard to keep the quality and make sure when people come to this community, we teach them the Sioux Falls way. We teach them that the United Way and our giving is an important ingredient. That's what keeps our quality of life. And that we can have diversity and we can get along. We got a lot of challenges, but I can tell you this, it's going to grow and we're not going to be able to help it. Our biggest problem will be to handle the hyper growth I think we're going to see over the next 20 years. And so it's going to be a hell of a ride, and I look forward to being part of it. I got to be honest.
Well, on that note, gentlemen, thank you very much. Jake and Jeff, thank you for joining us today and giving us such an exciting look at your 2 projects, your outlook on downtown Sioux Falls and the city. And I think to finish it up, keep the quality and teach the Sioux Falls way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tony.
Jake and Jeff, thank you. In our organization, we often talk about leadership in the context of strategy, vision, and passion. And I feel all 3 of those heavy on the passion. So thank you for the work that you're doing to drive our community forward. Looking ahead to next week, we have a week off. We'll meet you out at the Denny Sanford Premier Center for the Summit League tournament. We get displaced, so we will not be meeting. 2 weeks from now, we'll have Dusty Johnson here, and he's got a tough act to follow after these 2 gentlemen. But we'll look forward to having him. Otherwise, we have raffle tickets for sale in the back. And otherwise, have a great week, and we'll see you back here on the 14th. Thanks. Well, time.